Hello chess friends and welcome to the of Chess channel and welcome back to the TCEC Season 21 Superfinal between the two top engines Leela C0 and Stockfish 14. So after more than 50 games the result is clear. I think Stockfish is probably winning a new TCEC season because Stockfish has now a decisive +5 result, so I don't think there is any way that Leela C0 can get back into the game, because although maybe Stockfish will probably lose some games, maybe Stockfish has to play some dubious and bad openings, but still Leela C0 has to also play the reverse game. So that's why in my opinion Stockfish is probably the winner of the new TCEC season. So still we want to of course cover more games because they're really beautiful with great strategical and tactical elements, and today we're analyzing the last decisive game in which Stockfish played here with the white pieces and Leela C0 with the black pieces, and the French defense was on the board. And one particular moment you see also a tough battle I think between these two top engines, because the French defense is always sort of an opening in which you're struggling just in order to find some kind of tiny little improvement, to find maybe a good square in the position, to maybe occupy one square and then afterwards maybe to get some kind of advantage. So as I said, it was really sort of a war battle between these two top engines. In my opinion it was really a great strategical battle, although it wasn't maybe such a beautiful tactical game, but sometimes we should also analyze of course this strategical battles between these two top engines. So let's check out now the game. Here e4 played by Stockfish, e6 the French, d4 d5, knight to c3, knight to c6. We have now the Thoresen variation, and now after move e5 the last prearranged move by the organizer was the move b6. And okay, the engine, my Stockfish engine at home, gives here already a +1 position for Leela, pardon me, for white here for Stockfish 14. So it's again sort of a dubious opening, but I think this opening has a clear idea, at least for black. We have mentioned it many times in also my French defense series. If you want to study the French defense series, here's also the link of our whole series. You can maybe study it from white's, from black's perspective. So as I mentioned, always in these types of structures, the bishop, the light square bishop, is always a bad piece. So with the move b6, black is preparing here to trade off this bad piece, the bad bishop on c8, for white's good piece, because the bishop on d3 would be then the best piece, the best minor piece on the board. So that's why the move b6 is sort of a strategical preparation here to trade off really the bad piece for your opponent's good piece. But of course white has now some counter-attack possibilities. Here in the continuation, knight to e2 was played by Stockfish 14, because with the move knight to c6 you see black has not challenged the French defense setup here with the move c5 like black is always doing in the continuation of the game. So with the move knight to c6 you have some kind of a fast development, but you're not challenging the center immediately with the move c5, which gives now I think white this great opportunity to maneuver the knight and then fix the pawn structure here. Even with the move c3, then of course the direction of the attack is clear, because we have mentioned it also many times, the pawn chain is always showing us the direction of the attack. So it means white is attacking of course the king side, on the other hand black is of course attacking the queen side. So here in the continuation, bishop to a6, now comes this positional pin here by Leela c0. Leela is hoping that Stockfish moves the bishop somewhere and will probably then afterwards simply trade off the bishop for a bishop and go maybe into a slightly better continuation when it comes to bishop activity, because the dark square bishop of blacks would be then much better because of this long diagonal. And when we can notice white has now this block pawn chain on dark square, so that's why the dark square bishop of whites is not such a good piece. So here in the continuation we have now c3, we have queen to d7 by Leela c0, knight to f3. If we play f4, I was wondering why is white not immediately playing this move f4 in order to maybe break through here with g4 and f5. Actually it's not so good here to play the continuation like this, because here I think black can play really a great blockade idea with the move h5. Then of course maybe you can try knight to f3, but here with the move knight to e7 and knight to f5, I think that black has solved all of the positional problems in the continuation of the game on the king side. So there's no good way anymore for white to push through, because this knight to f5 h5 idea is really brilliant. And even if you move the bishop, pardon me, even if you move the knight here on g3, as I said, black would love to give up simply the light square bishop here for white's light square bishop on f1. So that's why here knight to f3, which is of course again a fast development, but it gives I think here white a more flexible game. Although here in the continuation again Leela c0 is preparing this idea h5 and then knight to f5, but then you have at least opportunities even to play f3 and then g4, maybe further kicking away the knight. So without the move f4, as we mentioned, you have I think here from white's perspective a much better flexibility to attack further the f5 square, of course, where this square is used by black in order to cement the position on light square. So here after move knight to a7, we have h4, we have now h5, we have now again this blockade idea, a4, here also by Stockfish 14, we have knight to f5, very nice square for the knight of course, and we have now g3, g6, we have now b4, here by Stockfish 14, and Stockfish is of course threatening now immediately the fork, so that's why here bishop to c4, again let's see Leela c0 stays on this diagonal, again Leela c0 is just waiting this knight to jump somewhere, and then of course to trade off the bishop for a bishop. So here bishop to g5, actually Stockfish does the same, because Stockfish would love, when we watch again this positional trade of pieces, again Stockfish would love also to give up here the dark square bishop for black's dark square bishop, because you see many pawns of white are on dark square, so that's why you don't want to have of course your dark square bishop on the board. So that's why here bishop to g5, also waiting black here to come out with the bishop on e7 and to simply trade off. As I said, even if you place here something like knight to d2, maybe in order to kick away the bishop from this active square, still black can proceed here with the wild move bishop to d3, again simply staying on this diagonal and trying to trade off the bishops for the bishops on light square. So here in the continuation after the move bishop to g5, we have bishop to e7, knight to f4, and now we have basically trades of pieces. Now the pawn structure is again blocked out in the center. Both engines are continuing now the game with the knights, but still of course it's a slightly advantage for white because of the space advantage. We have to notice it because white has already occupied the 5th rank, so when it comes to spaces white is slightly better, so that's why it's still sort of a +1 evaluation here for Stockfish 14. So here a5, great move by Leela c0. Leela c0 wants a clarification. Now on the queen side we have now b5, knight to e7, king to g2, we have now c6, again a great move by Leela c0, because after b takes c6 and queen to c6, what Leela c0 has accomplished here is at least 2 weaknesses, because here the weakness is of course this isolated pawn on a4 and also the backward pawn on c3. When it comes to weaknesses in black's position, it's of course now the weak pawn on b6. So now we'll have really a strategical battle how this engine will exploit these weaknesses, because both engines are trying now to simply play on the queen side. The problem is now always for black. Black should not castle, I think, immediately on the king side, because you could maybe even lose the tactical battle somehow, maybe here around the square e6. Then the queen is always a little bit stuck in order to defend this e6. I'm always calculating this kind of stuff, something like maybe queen to d3, f3, g4, kicking away the knight, and then maybe some sacrifices around the square e6. Of course it's not possible immediately, but when I watch these types of structures I always consider this as sort of a tactical plan to play the queen on light squares and then maybe sack one of these knights and sneak in somehow with the queen on g6. So far, as I said, it's not even possible, but as I said, at least you have some kind of idea how to attack the castle king position in the continuation of the game. So here queen to d2, we have rook to c8, you see now knight to e2, and now really we have this tiny little improvements of position here. Rook to b1 by Stockfish, we have rook to c6, f3. You see how important it was not to play the move f4 in the beginning. Now, as we said, we have now still the flexibility where we can play f3, then afterwards of course g4 is now also opportunity, because the knight is very annoying on the square f5, so that's why we want to kick it away. And now comes, I think, really one of the critical moments of the game. Here knight to h6. Knight to h6 will happen also in the continuation of the game, but you really don't want to place your knight on the edge of the board. The knight on f5 is perfectly fine. So as I said, in the continuation of the game we'll see also again this move knight to h6, which we I think the main mistake in Leela c0's game. Here after move rook to a2, queen to c7, attacking again the c3 pawn, we have rook to b3, knight to c8, then queen to f4. So you see Stockfish is also trying to really hard here to find some good attacking opportunities. It's not really easy to attack this position because of these weaknesses, because of this backward pawn, because of this isolated pawn on a4. So it's really sort of a tough battle now between these two top engines. So queen to e7, we have queen to d2, we have rook to c4, knight to f4, we have queen to d7, and now rook to a3. You see both engines are now repeating just moves just in order to find some kind of a good attacking opportunity. Rook to c1, you see Stockfish is also retreating here, queen to e7, rook to a2, rook to c4, knight to d3, again searching just for some squares on the board, queen to c7, rook to a3, again protecting this pawn, rook to c6, queen to e1, rook to c4, and now king to h3, which was some kind of an announcement here by Stockfish 14 that actually Stockfish is trying now finally to break the position with the move g4. But it's still risky, because even if you play now the move g4, then you could risk some tactical problems with the rook takes h4. You see, then after h takes g4, f takes g4, rook to h4 is now a possibility because of this knight's activity on f5. So actually what black should probably do here is simply go for a draw and stay with this knight on f5. But now after move here, rook to c6, rook to a1, rook to c4, again sort of a repetition, queen to d2, queen to d7, again you see many tiny little improvements of minor pieces, rook to b3, queen to b8, queen to e1. We have now again knight to g2. Now comes actually the critical moment of the game. As I said, knight to h6 wasn't really the best of moves here in the continuation, rook to b1, and after queen to c7 now comes, I think, the main motif here by Stockfish. It's now the move g4. As we said, we kept the flexibility with our pawn structure here. Now the move g4 is basically paralyzing both of these knights. The knight on e7 cannot jump on f5, this knight cannot also jump on f5. So now the g4 is such an important move now, and actually strategically when we watch now this game, white is suddenly much better. So maybe continuations could have been castling, or as I said, simply this repetition idea, trying to make perpetual moves here, and as I said, hope for a draw. But unfortunately Leela c0 played now this move knight to h6, and as we said, g4 here with the move g4, as we said, Stockfish really paralyzed now Leela c0 all over the board. So queen to c8, we have queen to d2, queen to c7, queen to d3. You see Stockfish is sneaking in, is maybe searching for some tactical opportunities here. As I said, it's not possible immediately, but I always consider these types of tactics, if it's possible, maybe in the continuation of the game, if many pieces are maybe leaving a little bit of protection of the king, then maybe it could be a possibility. After move queen to d3, we have now queen to d8. Maybe now finally castling is sort of an opportunity, but again I think because of the square on f4, white is again dancing with the knights against king. Maybe you can try h takes g4, f takes g4. You see, even if you try something like f6 in order to kick away the knight, then knight to g6 is also an opportunity. Takes, and we can also take out the rook. You can take out here, but now the rooks are getting into the game, and again I think white is much better, although black has two knights for the rook, but the f file is now open. The queen will get into the game, the queen will come on f6. We can also take out this one, kick away the knight. So when it comes to activity, I think these rooks are much better because the knights are restricted. The knights don't have good squares on the board for the whole game. So here in the continuation, queen to d8 was played instead of maybe castling. As we said, then knight to f4 would be probably the best continuation here for Stockfish. After move queen to d8, we have queen to d2, queen to c7. Now again knight to f4, we have knight to c8, queen to e3. So you see, Stockfish is not rushing in this game. First Stockfish improves now all of the pieces. We have rook to c4, we have queen to d3, and now rook to c6, and now rook to c1. You see, here's I think also one problem for white. White cannot play this move. White cannot play this move g takes h5. You would love, of course, to play that. You're hoping that you can take out then knight takes h5, and then maybe you can play knight to f6. But so far this move is not possible until black castles on the king side. If black castles on the king side, then it's possible, but so far it's not possible because you get simply knight to f5. That's the main issue. And now even if you take out this one, again, as I mentioned here, you lose the tactical battle on the h file with rook to h4. So that's why here taking out the pawn is not a good choice. Stockfish has to play again a little bit around the whole attack. Rook to c1, knight to e7, queen to b5, pinning also now the rook against the king, queen to d7, rook to b2. Again, simply tiny little improvements of position here by Stockfish. Rook to f2, queen to d7, rook to g2, and now after knight to g8, rook to c2, knight to e7. Again, Leela c0 is hoping to get maybe a draw by playing some perpetual moves. We have now c4. Finally, Stockfish realized that actually when we watch now this position, all of the pieces are basically on the best squares of whites. We have still this tension here around the square g4, so the only way in order to break through here is actually the move c4. Now we can notice Stockfish has built this rook battery on the c file. The queen is very active, the knights are very active, so there's simply no better activity for white anyway. Even if you could place your pieces wherever you like, you couldn't find, I think, better pieces on the board for white pieces. So as I said, now when the pieces are on the best squares, it's time to break through with the move c4. We have rook to c4, queen to b6, and now maybe rook to c2. Let's now analyze a particular continuation. Rook to c2, then of course rook to c2, castling, and down, and queen to a5 is of course then again much better position for white. If you take here rook takes a4 instead of rook to c2, it's again not much better because rook to b8, queen to b8 happens, then you lose the battle here on the b file. You can maybe cover with the knight, but it's simply too much pressure around the square c8, so again it's simply lost. And even if you take with the queen to a4, here the pawn again, queen to b8 happens, you have to go with your king here. We play queen to d6, again you're playing of course here king to e8, but now we can take, and now rook to b1 is simply winning the game because black's king is naked, and black's king cannot castle because we have already played the check as we said, and then the king had to move. Now with rook to b8 the game is tactically over. So as I said, here after move queen to b6, you see rook takes c2 is not working, rook takes c4, rook takes a4 is not working, queen to a4 is not working. So that's why here Leela c0 castled, and here Stockfish really forced now Leela c0 to castle. Now it's time again to break through. Here in the continuation we have rook to c4, we have d takes c4, but now rook to c4, knight to d5, we have knight takes d5, we have h takes g4, f takes g4, and here Leela c0 takes. But now comes the stunner of the game. The rook is hanging. Whenever we have some kind of attack by an opponent, we should always first consider the counter-attack possibility. Now Stockfish plays a brilliant move. It's the move e6, really wild stuff. So now Stockfish opens the whole position in front of black's king. Now it's a much better continuation here for Stockfish. You saw how Stockfish improved simply for a little bit every piece on the board. When the pieces were on the best squares, then it was time to strike. Now with the move e6, it's much better position. As we said, we have queen to e7, we have e takes f7, king to h8, and now the rook has to retreat. The problem is now you cannot play this one. Queen to g6 is a tempting move, but then you get here queen to e3. It would lead into a draw because you cannot move. You can play maybe this one, but even if you retreat, then you get queen to g4, and I think black is always finding a great way to play some perpetuals. So this game is ending with a draw. So that's why rook to c3. First Stockfish covers the third rank. We have now knight takes f7, queen takes g6, knight takes g5, queen to g5, queen takes g5, h takes g5. But now we have reached now an endgame in which of course Stockfish is much better with this extra pawns on the king side. Although they're double pawns, but actually they're very good because you can play something like maybe g6, king to h4, and then king to g5. You can always hide with your king, then no checks are possible by the rook. In the continuation we have rook to f4. Here Leela c0 is of course trying to take some pawns. Stockfish does the same, takes also out here the pawn on a5, king to g7, and now the king goes towards the other side of the board. We have king to g6, rook to a6 attacking the king, g6. We have now g5, king to g7, king to g4. Now Leela c0 is also pushing the pawn. We have king to f5, d3, now a check. We have king to g8, king to e4. Now again a new move, and here after king to d3. So see, the threat was always something like if you play for instance too early this move, then you get always a check and the promotion. So that's why here the king had to play actively. King to d3, rook to g1, king takes, and now after rook to g2, king to e3. Here Leela c0 didn't even take. It's of course now completely winning endgame. G7, rook to c4, king to e5, rook to c8, king to f6, simply marching with the king. We have now rook to d8 after king to g7. In this position, Leela c0 resigns. So let's see now any continuation. Let's see now. I think the easiest way how to win the game, in my opinion, rook to d3 is perfectly fine. Then you get simply with your rook behind the pawn, because the king is much closer to this to the queen side. Now we're simply playing with the king, attacking the rook, and now simply pushing the pawn further, and it's of course game over. So brilliant positional strategical game. As I said, it's not maybe one of the most attractive games that we have seen by Stockfish 14, but I really like this game because I think we reach many times these types of positions, these types of structures, so sometimes we don't know what to do. Actually, Stockfish showed us here that we should really try to improve first really all of our pieces on the board, because black didn't have good counterplay, and I actually really liked Stockfish idea without the move f4 with playing knight to f3, because Stockfish had a great flexibility then afterwards with f3 g4, which was I think also very important strategic element in the continuation of the game. And as I said, Stockfish waited when the pieces were on the best course, then it was time to strike with the move c4. Then the position exploded, and it was then from that point on really brilliant tactical game play by the fish. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more strategical and tactical battles between these two top engines, check out my commented chess games play by computer series with some more games by Alpha Zero, Leela Zero, Stockfish, and many more. And if you want to see some human games, check out my best chess games of all time series with some great games by Paul Murphy, Gary Kasparov, Bobby Fischer, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.